But today I wanted to talk about an issue that you may all think is a national issue and one that perhaps doesn't impact on the May the 1st elections, but you would be wrong. Indeed, the population explosion that has happened in this country has had a bigger effect on the lives of more people than any other single issue. And it's interesting because up until 1997, this wasn't even a political debate. Indeed, when I was first elected to the European Parliament in 1999, immigration didn't appear in my election literature or our manifesto at all. And that's because simply, from Windrush right up until Mr. Blair became Prime Minister, net migration into Britain had run at an average of 30 to 50,000 people a year, sometimes higher, sometimes lower. It wasn't even a debate in successive general elections. But the Labour Party under Blair decided that diversity was a good thing, something that was never ever to be questioned, and that mass immigration would be good for the economy, would make us all better off, and frankly, anybody that dared to even question this up until at least 2010 was considered completely and utterly beyond the pale. The worst of the worst. And I know this because I first started speaking out about open borders in 2004, when it became pretty obvious to me that opening up the door to 8 and then 10 former communist countries, some of whom had an economy that were only the seventh the size of ours, would lead to a huge inflow of people. Although at least in those days, people that came did actually work. That sadly has now all changed. And since then, in every single general election, we've been made a series of promises that frankly amount to little more than a pack of lies. The public being told what the parties think the public want to hear. In fact, know from polling what the public want to hear without any intention of delivering on it at all. Of course, the Conservatives, far worse than Tony Blair, net migration to tens of thousands promised in 2010, 2015, 2017, and then 2019, we were told substantially lower numbers. We now have a Labour government who've promised they will radically bring down the numbers coming into Britain, and we'll find out in June when we get the first ONS data whether that's true, although I very much doubt it. We've been told by successive prime ministers they would stop the boats, even that they would smash the gangs. Well, I'm afraid none of it has come true. And I think it's about time we looked at the true cost of the population explosion to this country. And I want to make this point very clear, that recent polling, particularly polling that was published last week in the Sun newspaper, which was the whole of the Midlands and the North, showed that we are now by far the most trusted party on this issue, and that I am by far the most trusted leader to do something about it. It'll be good for the economy, is what we were told. Well, 30 years ago, 7% of the workforce were foreign-born. Today, 21% of the workforce are foreign-born. That has directly led to a pay cut, on average, of about 3% per worker, which of course doesn't really mean very much if you're earning big money, but if you're earning £20,000 a year, it does mean quite a lot. And interestingly, the Bank of England in 2015 produced a report showing a direct link between numbers of foreign-born workers and wage suppression, yet the whole thing was completely and utterly covered up. The impact, of course, on wages is worse than that, given that there are 500,000, 700,000, who knows, people working in the illegal economy, leading to further wage suppression. The greatest myth, of course, is that it will be good for us, and you must stop moaning about it because everybody that is here has come to work. Well, try this statistic for size. Foreign-born workers are 40% higher likely to be unemployed than British-born workers. 40% higher for foreign-born people to be on the unemployment register. It's not a statistic I'd ever heard before. It's pretty mind-blowing. And even the argument that, look, most people come here to work, so what is there to complain about? Well, I'm afraid that doesn't work either, because in the last 6 years, net 3 million people have settled in Britain from outside of Europe. And of those, only 16% came on work visas. It's a completely mind-blowing number. Now, it's true to say that many of those who've come perhaps will enter the workforce. But you begin to understand that the argument for mass migration, that it's needed for the labour market, actually isn't true, when the majority that come as dependents. The Centre for Migration Studies recently published that since 2020, unemployment benefits to foreign-born people have been £36 billion. We are talking simply about eye-watering numbers. The other statistic that I was surprised by was that low-paid migrants on average cost the taxpayer £150,000 by the time they reach retirement, let alone what that will be afterwards. So let us be clear. Non-selective, in many cases non-working, mass migration into Britain has made everybody in this country poorer, except, of course, for big employers who love as much cheap migrant foreign labour as they can possibly get their hands on, as the argument grows every year that British people simply won't do those jobs. But we're told it's okay because we're growing, we're getting richer. Gross domestic product is going up, and that's the only measure that anybody on the two front benches in Parliament will ever talk about. I did try the other day with Rachel Reeves, and she's trying too, but I did try to make the argument that actually GDP in gross figures doesn't mean very much when you have a population that's rising by 750,000 or 1 million every year directly as a result of open borders. Why not look at GDP per capita? But no, nobody wants to engage with that. Well, the last 2 years have seen record levels of migration into Britain, and GDP per capita has fallen in 6 of the last 8 quarters. We are getting poorer as a result of policies started by the Labour Party, accelerated by the Conservative Party, and now being continued by Labour. None of which, of course, means that we in this country don't want high-skilled, law-abiding people to come into Britain, to work, pay taxes, add to our society. All of those things are good. But we have to discriminate. Yes, that's the word I'm going to use. It means choose. We have to discriminate in terms of who comes into our country and in what numbers. To try and have a rational debate about housing is virtually impossible. I've been trying for over 10 years to engage other party leaders in a rational debate about the terrible housing shortage, the cost of housing and rents in this country. Nobody will engage with me. Of the house price rises that we've had over the last 2 decades, 25% of that is directly down to immigration and the rising population. Indeed, even the Ministry of Housing themselves said in 2018, again suppressed, not publicised, that a 1% increase in the number of households leads to a 2% increase in cost. And just think on this, there were 23.7 million households when Mr Blair came to power. There are now 28.5 million households. Net migration has increased the population by 10 million in the last 20 years. And the same goes for rent. Even in recent years, a third of rent rises since 2020 are directly down to rising population, which means for the average renter, another £1,000 a year. And think on this. This government is determined to build 1.5 million new homes in the lifetime of this Parliament, just as the government before was committed to the same figure. That will not have any impact on the housing crisis in Britain in any way at all. We currently have to build a new house every 2 minutes. Yes, that's right. We have to build one new house every 2 minutes just to cope with levels of net migration into Britain, not dealing at all with the backlog that we've built up. And perhaps one of the areas that is causing the most angst is social housing. And we know we do have a shortage of social housing stock in our country. But somebody who comes into the Port of Dover, a young man without any documents, who's come from goodness knows where, who believes in who knows what, Once they're given indefinite leave to remain, and we increasingly do that because we find it too difficult to deport anybody anywhere, they then effectively are homeless, which means, of course, they go straight to the top of the social housing list. It's happening in every county. Just one example, Northumberland last year, hundreds of asylum seekers who were given indefinite leave to remain went straight to the top of the housing queue, whilst there were 14,000 families on the list who were put, I'm afraid, to the back. That's just one county example, but it's happening literally everywhere. But it's okay, we're told, we wouldn't be able to have a national health service if it wasn't for increasing net migration into Britain. That is what we've been told over and over and over, and you'll still hear those arguments on BBC Question Time pretty much every week. We need foreign doctors and nurses. Well, I would put a different argument to you. I would say we should probably be ashamed of ourselves for taking over 100,000 doctors and nurses from the red list, from underdeveloped countries where undoubtedly those medical experts are needed even more than they're needed here. Amazing to think, 100,000 workers in 25 years coming from countries that need them more than us, and yet, right at the moment, we only have 9,500 people in medical training of any kind at all. It's almost as if the NHS is happier to take on agency staff from West Africa, and we've sort of lost the idea that we should be training enough of our own doctors and nurses. And perhaps one of the biggest political issues in Britain that affects people's lives is access to a GP appointment, something that we pretty much took as a birthright, to be honest. Well, have a think about this. 7.2 million foreign-born people have registered with GPs in the last 10 years. And you're surprised you can't get an NHS appointment. All I'm doing here is giving you cold, hard facts, all of which I can back up if you want further documentation. I'm telling you the truth about the terrible, terrible mistakes that have been made by both of our so-called main parties. And one that is very difficult to talk about because you're always told that you're scapegoating, you're saying something that is truly beastly, is crime. Mass immigration has increased crime in this country in actually quite a dramatic way. Foreign-born nationals are 71% more likely to be convicted of sexual assault, 69% more likely to be convicted of drug offences, 39% more likely to be convicted of any kind of crime. 1 in 50 Albanians in Britain is in jail. Now, what does that tell you? Does it tell you that the whole of Albania is rotten, that they're all awful? No, what it tells you is if you come from a poorer country, there are richer pickings in crime in London and Birmingham and Manchester and frankly even Dover than there are where you come from. It's why I return to my point. We must discriminate when it comes to who can come into our country. We must choose who the right people are, regardless of race, religion or geography. Are these people going to contribute to British society? Are these people going to integrate in British society? We've allowed foreign criminal gangs now to dominate London streets. It's been going on for years, and nobody even dares talk about it. And don't even get me started on the Turkish barbershops. I mean, I've been talking about this for some years. I even raised it when I announced that I was going to stand in the general election last year on the 3rd of June. And several in the press corps, I just thought I was off my rocker, and they probably still do. And I made the point that these are springing up everywhere. They take cash only, they don't cut anyone's hair, and they've all got a Lamborghini parked out the back. Well, I'm pleased to say the National Crime Agency has now raided 300 of these over the course of the last month, and perhaps they should follow my social media a little bit more. Think about this. The Home Secretary has promised that she will, by the end of the year, start to publish the crime statistics, and I hope that she does. I hope she lives up to her word. Because when this has happened in the rest of Europe, it has led to very dramatic political changes with the rise of parties, many of whom we would not ourselves wish to directly associate with. One little example. Denmark allowed in 321 people, Palestinians, a couple of decades ago, And 64% of that number have been convicted of crime. It is stats like that that are fundamentally changing politics across Europe, and in a way that can often be, I think, pretty unhelpful and further widen division. And that division we've seen here too. I'm afraid we've seen, and I predicted this some years ago, the growth of sectarian politics. You know, the four people sit behind me in the chamber, along with Mr. Corbyn, but the four are Gaza independents. Their vote is purely on religious lines. Now, I've never seen sectarian politics in my lifetime in England, but I have seen it in Northern Ireland and all the baleful consequences that that led to. I have a feeling that this is an issue that will really start to hurt the Labour Party by the time the next general election comes along, where the Gaza independents will win many, many more seats. Let alone South Asian gangs fighting on the streets of Leicester, or the fact that 1 million people who are living here permanently speak little or no English whatsoever. We have to be careful, and we've been subjected to lies, lies, lies. Now, we're in Dover because it was here in 2020, just as the pandemic was kicking in and lockdown was starting, that I began to go out from this port to film the migrant boats crossing. It was a story that, you know, I mean, sort of Radio Kent would cover it. It was a local story, but a story that nationally wasn't being told. And it was very clear to me in 2020, and I said that, frankly, you might as well put up a sign on the White Cliffs of Dover, everyone welcome. And I predicted there would be an invasion. It's a word that got me in very big trouble. But have a look at the numbers that have come. As for this government promising it would smash the gangs, I never believed a word of it. There's as much chance of that working on our current course as there is of smashing the drug gangs, something we've heard from governments for decade after decade, yet Class A proliferates on every street in the country today. Labour are doing very, very badly indeed. In fact, year on year, the numbers crossing the Channel are 40% up already. And that's before we get the warmer water and the longer, clear, settled spells of weather. This is a national security emergency. And one of the trends that we've noticed in the last few weeks are now a number of young Palestinians coming in from Gaza. And of course, they claim asylum. They'll be granted asylum. But frankly, letting people in from war zones, young males of fighting age from war zones, when you don't know what their involvement in those areas might have been, is an incredibly dangerous thing to do. And I am the only party leader that has been trusted on legal immigration. I've been arguing it since 2004. And on illegal immigration, I've been arguing it since 2020. These local elections on May the 1st, this issue will have a huge impact. I will give you but one example this morning, which is a northern constituency called Runcorn and Helsby. There are 750 young men living in that constituency who have crossed the English Channel. 750 of them, just in one constituency. And the big debate and the big press coverage is all about the hotels, something else that I exposed back in 2020. But the hotels, frankly, are the least of the problem. It's the HMOs that are increasingly becoming the issue. The houses of multiple occupancy. And as we've been out and campaigned in that constituency, yes, that house there are 10 men living in that house. There are 15 men living in the house round the corner. They loiter all day on the streets. They follow our kids to school. We're scared to go out in the evening. These are the impacts. These are the impacts on the lives of a huge number of people in this country. And yet Westminster just wants to cock a deafen. It doesn't really want to engage with any of these things. The cost just in that constituency alone to local government is £85,000 a day. And it's the same here in Kent, and it's the same everywhere. The total cost for housing these people is not all met by national government through taxation. 20 to 25% of it has to be met by local authorities. Well, you might say it's all well and good moaning and complaining about the failures of the two so-called main, maybe not for long, political parties. What I've tried to do there is to lay out some statistics over a broad range of issues to show you the extent to which this population explosion has damaged the quality of, I haven't even mentioned the roads, has damaged the quality of life for so many people. So what do we, as the most trusted party in this area, what do we intend to do about it? Well, frankly, the whole thing is pretty fruitless unless we leave the European Court of Human Rights and repeal the 1998 Human Rights Act. Every single week we see people, criminals, people who behave terribly, who ought to be deported, but they're not, because they claim the right to a family life under Article 8 of the ECHR, something that our own judiciary leans on. I recommit today we must have no more population increase due to net migration. That is something we may have to revisit as the numbers that are leaving Britain is going up pretty alarmingly, as is seen, of course, in the tax receipts from Rachel Reeves's figures in the last few days. We are committed to ending two-tier policing and two-tier justice, and frankly, that becomes ever clearer and clearer, particularly since Southport, and it's something that is enraging the silent majority in this country. And we will end all DEI recruitment in the public sector. The fact that 43 police forces now discriminate against white people in favour of ethnic minorities for jobs can only divide our country yet further. It's a mistake. We as a political party are colourblind. We couldn't care less what colour you are. We couldn't care less where you come from. We couldn't care less what your religion is. We just ask that if you come here, you work, you pay your taxes, you speak our language, you integrate with us. Of course, you can have your own private observance, but that is what we demand of people. And we have to have a meritocratic society. That is the only way. It's the only way our private companies or our public sector can achieve their best. And we will, of course, reiterate the fact that as an island we have advantages and we need strong borders. But enough of Home Secretary after Home Secretary making promises and dodging issues. This Labour government claim they've increased deportations, but all they've done is to send away visa overstayers and those who are happy to voluntarily return, often with £3,000 in their pocket. We will demand, this government does the same, that there is a minister for deportations. It will be part of the Home Office, but it'll be a separate department within it. We will need to recruit new people, as much of the evidence is that those that currently work in the Home Office would willfully obstruct policy if we won the next general election. But somebody somewhere in government needs to be held accountable. And you know, you've only got to go back 20 years to the last Labour government, and they were deporting tens of thousands of people a year who were here illegally. When Blunkett was Home Secretary, if you came illegally, you didn't touch the sides. You were sent back. So what I'm calling for isn't actually anything particularly radical. It's actually just common sense. It's what most countries in the world do. You want to go and live there, you want to go and settle there, you have to meet a set of criteria. And that country chooses, are you the right person or are you not? I know the problem is huge, because there are an estimated 1.2 million people here illegally. And going beyond the last couple of 100,000 is not going to be an easy job. It's going to be one hell of a battle, and we know that the state and the apparatus of state will fight us at every point. But it is our intention, ultimately, that if you've come illegally, you should not be able to stay. You should not be able to make a spurious claim that somehow your right to a family life means you should stay here. We will, in 3 to 4 weeks' time, announce more detailed policy on how we will actually carry out those deportations. We'll do that after the election, but I make the intention very, very clear here today. We will bring a total end to all asylum claims from people who've come here on travel visas or who are overseas students. We will demand the deportation of all foreign criminals. And for those who come to Britain and who are granted citizenship, that will be regarded as a legally binding contract, just as it is in Australia and elsewhere. We welcome you in if you make those pledges to us, but you actually have to obey the law and be somebody who is a positive benefit to our country. We are a party who are very proud of the fact we had more votes in the general election from the ethnic minority vote than the Liberal Democrats did. And an increasing number of people from all communities want to stand for our party. These are people who came to Britain, or their parents came to Britain, because they wanted to be part of this great country. They wanted to become a success in this great country. So try as anyone might to twist anything I've said today. All I've given you are hard facts. All I've laid out are sensible policies that will stop illegal immigration into Britain and stop the population explosion, which is damaging the quality of life for so many countless millions. Thank you very much indeed.